Right. So let's look at this passage, which is your first test of literature and art. So in this passage, we are basically talking about the Marxian doctrines. Okay, and these Marxian doctrines are basic. What do you say? The rules or tenets of the socialistic principles that Marx was, you know, giving. Now, although this is a literature passage, you will find a lot of, how do you say, intersection of politics over here. Okay. Apart from politics, the jargon that we'll be learning in this particular passage will be related to political systems most of the time. Okay. So I'm sure you have gone through this passage in your test. So without any further ado, I'd like to go ahead and highlight a few of the terms that I think are important for us to understand the meaning of this passage, like this one over here, bourgeois or proletariat, feudalism. In fact, I think proletariat we've seen in the class one of the day, especially in these kind of sections only. All right. So if we are looking at this particular passage, this passage starts with the statement, the most essential of Marx's doctrines may be reduced to three. First, what is called as a materialistic interpretation of history. Second, law of concentration of capital. And third, the class war. So basically, we understand that there are three different doctrines that Marx has prepared. Okay, now what is a doctrine? A doctrine is nothing but a rule of theory. Okay, so this passage very clearly we can say is a descriptive passage. Okay, we are describing about the Marxian doctrines over here. Yes, is he trying to convince you of something? Well, he repeatedly keeps on saying that this process is going to make us understand what are the evils and injustices of the capital system. Okay, throughout the thing. So if we are looking at this particular thing for the first one, here is where he mentions it. He says that, in some sense of necessity, this will bring out the evils of the capitalistic system. The same thing is, told over here also. This process was to make more and more glaring the evils of injustice of the capital system. So we can understand that as a socialist, Marx was against capitalistic system. Okay, now what is capitalistic system? Capitalistic system is a system of business where one person runs a business and he holds all the wealth. Okay, the wealth is not divided amongst people, it's concentrated with one particular person. Now, this basic understanding is required for you to go ahead and solve this passage effectively. Okay, so let me just clear the ink from the screen and I can go ahead to explain you the passage. Now here, about the first part, what does he call the materialistic interpretation of history? He says that Marx holds that in the main of all the phenomena of human history, human society have their origin in material conditions. Okay, so he's saying that humans have their origin in material conditions, and these he takes to be embodied in the economic system. So economic somehow affects the materialistic conditions in which humans are born. Political constitutions, laws, religions, philosophies, all these he regards in the broad outlines, expressions of economic regime and the society gives rise to them. Basically, he's saying that the economic regime, the control of economy that's there gives rise to all of these things, political constitution, laws, religions, and philosophies, everything. Okay, it would be unfair to represent him as maintaining that the conscious economic motive is the only one of importance. It's rather that the economics molds character and opinion and is thus prime source of much that appears in consciousness and have no connection with them. Right. So what's he trying to say over here? He's trying to say that economic motive, that means doing something with the purpose of getting economy, is not the only thing, but economics as a whole, okay, holds some kind of a influence on what happens. Okay, on what happens to whom? To character and opinion of a person. Okay, now so much so that it becomes the prime source of what comes out of consciousness or how consciousness develops. Okay, now he applies this doctrine in particular to two revolutions. So apparently there are two revolutions that he wants to apply this doctrine to as an example. So the first one is the French Revolution that he's talked about, where the bourgeois. What is the bourgeois? The bourgeois is nothing but the middle class people. We've also seen this word in the class a lot of times. Okay, the bourgeois is the middle class people. So the fight is against the feudalism. Feudalists or feudalism are the landlords. Okay, so these jamindar kinds who take the land from the king and provide protection and all. Okay, which finds its expression according to him, particularly in the French Revolution. So this is an example of the French Revolution. One in the future. So this French Revolution one was in the past. What about the one in the future? The one in the future is the revolution of wage earners or proletariat against the bourgeois. So who are these proletariats? Basically, proletariats are people who are working for money. Specifically looking at it, they're the agrarian culture people. Okay, the farmer kinds and all who are not only farmer who are mostly into labor intensive practices. Okay, if we are looking at it, the maestries, the blacksmiths, the goldsmiths, all these people come into the construction workers. All these people come under the proletariat class. Okay, so the proletariat against the bourgeois. And why will this war happen? So the first war was amongst whom the bourgeois and the feudalists, and the second war is about the bourgeois and the proletariats. Why is this war happening? This war is happening so that a socialist commonwealth could be established. What do we understand by the socialist commonwealth? Wealth that is shared by everyone in the society. The whole moment of history is viewed by him as necessary as the effect of material costs operating upon human beings. Okay, he does not so much advocate the socialist revolution as he predicts it. So basically, he's not saying that do it for the socialist revolution, but he says this will happen. Okay, he holds it is true that it will be beneficial, but he is much more concerned to prove that it must inevitably come. Okay, so he's saying that it's true, it will be beneficial, but he's very, very concerned that it will come true. It is inevitable. Okay, the same sense of necessity is visible in his exposition of the evils of the capital system. So that same sense of necessity, that means it is necessary for us to also expose the evils of the caste system, of the what? Capitalistic system. Okay. He does not blame capitalists for their cruelties, which he shows them to have been guilty, but he merely points out that they are under the inherent necessity to behave cruelly so long as private ownership of land and capital continues. But their tyranny will not last forever, for it generates the forces that must, in the end, overthrow it. So basically, he's saying that capitalists are to blame for acquiring land and money and everything. But they are doing it out of their own necessity. Okay, they are being cruel because of their own necessity. And when will this cruelty end? This cruelty will end only when they will get overthrown. Okay, and that is going to happen because their system is not going to last forever. All right. So that is the first part about what he's talking about. That's a materialistic interpretation of history. How history can be interpreted through the materialistic process, or the materialistic process in this case is the capitalistic environment, bringing out money and acquiring of lands and resources. Okay, the second one, the law of concentration of capital. Marx pointed out that the capitalistic undertakings tend to grow larger and larger. Okay, he says that capitalistic undertakings or businesses keep on growing larger and larger. Okay, and he foresaw the substitution of trust for free competition and predicted that the number of capitalistic enterprises must diminish as the magnitude of single enterprises rises. So let us say that there's a big business, okay, and then small businesses are rising. So as and when the small businesses are rising, they're eating up the market of the big business. So that will reduce. That's what he's trying to say. He supposed that this process must involve a diminution. Diminution means reduction. Okay, not only in the number of businesses, but also in the number of capitalists. Okay, so not only will this reduce the number of businesses, but will also reduce the number of capitalists. Indeed, he usually spoke as though each business were owned by a single man. That means one business means one person. That's what he thought. That's what he spoke like. So the more the number of men, more the number of businesses, what he spoke. Accordingly, he expected that men would continually driven from the ranks of capitalists into those of the proletariat, and that the capitalists in the course of time would grow numerically weaker and weaker. That means the numbers will dwindle down, they will reduce in numbers, and some capitalists will become, working class people. I should not really say working class people. They would become labor intensive working class people. Okay. Next, he applied this principle not only to industry but also to agriculture. He expected to find the landowners growing fewer and fewer while their estates grew larger and larger. So the number of people who are owning this land will reduce while each of them who are owning land will increase their land and size. This process was to make more and more glaring at the evils of injustice of the capitalistic system. So if agriculture turns out to be the capitalistic system, how would it be and what are the evils is what he's also specified towards the end. Okay. Now, the last thing that he talks about is of the class war. Now, Marx conceives the wage earner and the capitalist in sharp antithesis. That means they're opposites. Antithesis is the opposite. Okay. He imagines that every man is or must sooner become wholly the one or the wholly the other. That means either you're a wage earner or you're a capitalist. You're never both a wage earner and a capitalist. Okay. The wage earner who possesses nothing is exploited by the capitalist who possesses everything. That means the capitalist, has everything. So he's kind of taking advantage of the wage earner. As the capitalistic system works itself out and its nature becomes more clear, the opposition of bourgeois or proletariat becomes more and more marked. That means once the capitalistic environment is settled over there, okay, what happens? Am I recording this? Am I not recording this? Yeah, okay. So as and when the capitalistic culture becomes more and more, what happens? The opposition of the working class also will increase towards the capitalistic society. Why? Because they're occupying more land, they're occupying more resources than that's needed. These people are getting less and less. Okay, so working men learn gradually to combine against their exploiters, first locally, then nationally, and then internationally. Okay, so basically he's saying at levels. First, you would locally combine with people and start fighting, then you go national, then you go international. So once you've combined internationally, the war is kind of won. Okay, what will you do then? Then you'll pass a decree. What is a decree? It's nothing but a rule or a small kind of tenet. It's kind of a paper that people have to agree to. It's kind of an agreement, you can say. Okay, they will then decree that all land and capital shall be owned in common. That means everyone should have ownership of land and capital. And then exploitation will cease. The tyranny of owners of wealth will no longer be possible. There will no longer be any division of society into classes. All men will be free. So this is what Marx envisions when all these three kind of things happen. The class war ends. Okay. All these ideas are already contained in the Communist Manifesto, a work of the most amazing vigor and force, setting forth with terse compression the titanic forces of the world. These titanic forces of the world are nothing but the capitalistic people. The Titanic means the huge, okay, the huge, humongous forces. The Titan, the word Titan means huge, okay. And what does this word terse mean? Terse compression means abrupt compression. Okay, सारे का नफ केड़म, एक ही बार choke कर देना. Okay, their epic battle and their inevitable consummation. That means their epic battle and then making it work somehow. Okay, inevitable consummation is inevitably making it work. Okay, this work is of such importance in the development of socialism and gives such an admirable statement of the doctrine set forth at greater length and with more pedantry and capital that its salient passages must be known by anyone who wishes to understand the whole which Marxian socialism has acquired over intellect and imagination of larger proportion of working class leaders. Basically, what he's saying, the kind of how do I put it in statement? The kind of detail and the kind of concern that he has on the capital part, okay, and the length at which he has given is a very, very beneficial thing. And it's supposed to be known by everyone who wants to learn Marxian socialism. Okay. So I hope we understand this passage well with this explanation. Let's go to the questions. What happened? Yeah. Okay. So what does this question talk about? Why does Marx believe that socialist revolution is inevitable? Okay. A capitalistic system is inherently tyrannical and immoral and unlikely to persist because of its immorality. Okay. So we're not really talking about, whether a capitalistic system is good or bad. We're talking about why will a socialistic revolution come. So clearly, I can say that A will not be an answer. What kind of an answer is it? It's an, inconsistent answer. This is an inconsistent answer. Right. What about B? As the inequities of capitalistic system become more apparent, more people will join hands to fight it, eventually leading to a socialistic revolution. Right. So what's he telling? The more and more people get to know about the injustices or the evils of capitalistic system, more will people join their hands, which is what we see throughout the three different laws that he has proposed. So B can be our answer. What about C? Like the bourgeois fought the feudals, the proletariat fight the bourgeois. Again, this becomes a partial scope choice for us. And what about here? The passage does not state why Marx thinks socialist revolution. Okay. Now, we clearly know that he predicted socialistic revolution, right? So this answer is an opposite answer. Okay. So our answer should be B. All right. Clear?